Well, this morning we've been hearing about making a stand for God in the pulpit, but what if you're the Chief Justice of Alabama and you are told to stop using God's name? I'd like you to watch this brief video introduction about this landmark case that you've been hearing about, but we'd like you to see a little bit more of the story right now.
And your understanding is that the federal court ordered that you could not acknowledge God, isn't that right?
Yes.
And if you resume your duties as Chief Justice after this proceeding, you will continue to acknowledge God as you have testified that you would today.
Absolutely.
No matter what any other official says.
Absolutely. Without, if I can clarify that, without an acknowledgement of God, I cannot do my duty. I must acknowledge God. It says so in the Constitution of Alabama. It says so in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. It says so in everything I've read. So
the only point I'm trying to clarify, Mr. Chief Justice, is not why, but only that, in fact, if you do resume your duties as Chief Justice, you will continue to do that without regard to what any other official says. Isn't that right?
Well, I will do the same thing this court did in starting with prayer. That's an acknowledgement of God. I would do the same thing that justices do when they place their hand on the Bible and say, "So help me God." It's an acknowledgement of God. The Alabama Supreme Court opens with, "God save the state and this honorable court." It's an acknowledgement of God. In my opinions, which I've written many opinions, acknowledging God as the source, a moral source of our law. And I think you must.
During the trial of this matter, Chief Justice maintained his defiance, testifying that he stood by an earlier statement given by him to the Judicial Inquiry Commission, in which he stated in part, "I did what I did because I upheld my oath, and that's what I did. So I have no apologies for it. I would do it again." The Chief Justice showed no signs of contrition for his actions. Because of the magnitude of the decision with regard to sanctions for the Chief Justice's violation of the canons of judicial ethics was a difficult one for this court to make. Finding no other viable alternatives, this court hereby orders that Roy S. Moore be removed from his position of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama. This court is now adjourned.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to present to you Chief Justice Roy Moore.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If y'all will keep talking, I won't have to, or keep clapping, I won't have to talk, and that'd probably be better, because following these Benham brothers and Flip, it's very difficult. And I realize you got dessert, so eat. Maybe that'll make it better. But it is difficult to come up here and follow such great talent. I would like to thank Tony Perkins for all he's done. Give him a big hand, because he deserves it. It's hard, it's difficult to get three pastors in a group sometimes, and he does such a wonderful job. General Jerry Boykin is somebody that I've acknowledged for so many years as one of my heroes. He actually did what I would do, but he did it at the highest levels of the military, and he did it in the face of great controversy. So thank you, General, for what you've done. The entire Research Council personnel, I just admire them so much, because they do such a great job. I want to thank Sharon and Krista especially, because what they've done. I see many pastors in here where I've spoken at your church. Steve Riggle is someone in Texas that I've spoken many times at his church. And I'm very honored today to have a congressman from the state of Alabama who is my congressman. And being unprepared as I am, I'm kind of embarrassed to be up here talking, but it's Congressman Robert Adderholt. He is from Alabama, and he does such a wonderful job. He's a devout Christian, and I appreciate him so much. Thank you. He's right over here at table 1. He's going to have to leave early because he's got an overseas trip, but I understand that. Besides, I'd leave if I was talking to him. But anyway, what can I say? I'm in government. By the way, I am Chief Justice. I was reelected in 2012. That alone shows the power of God. Because I was removed. The man who removed me is still a lower court judge under me now. And I took the oath of office in the same place, only a few feet from where I was removed. Not many officials have been removed, and it wasn't over the Ten Commandments. It was over the acknowledgement of the sovereignty of God. So I'm going to talk to you. I didn't have a lesson planned today. I do a lot of teaching. And Tony told them that I just talk about what I talked about before when I was up here, and I forgot what I talked about before. The older you get forgetful. I call the story of the guy that had a professional golf pro, and he had a caddy that couldn't see very well. He was getting a little older, and he couldn't see very well, and he had to get another caddy because he was going to a big tournament. And they said, well, what about old Joe? He said, old Joe? He said, I'm already having trouble with someone who can't see. He said, he's got perfect eyesight. He can see 300 yards. He can see the ball perfectly. He said, well, I don't know. He said, but I'll try old Joe. So he took old Joe out and he hit the ball, and it went up on the green and went so far, and he turned to Joe and he said, Joe, did you see that ball? He said, yes, sir, I saw it. See it very well. Where'd it go? Joe went, I forgot. I think that's our problem in this country. Oh, foolish people, and without understanding, which have eyes that see not, which have ears that fear not. Will you not tremble at my presence? Can a maid forget her ornaments, or maid her attire? But my people have forgotten me days without number. Hear ye this, O house of Jacob, which are called by the name of Israel, and are come forth by the waters of Judah, which swear by the name of the Lord, make mention of the God of Israel, but not in truth, nor in righteousness. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel. For the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of this land, because there's no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. A few verses that come to my mind about how we have forgotten God. Now I'm going to tell you, they gave me, is this a clicker? And they told me how to work it. Now I can't work anything. My wife knows this very well. I miss her telephone. To go forward, I will click, and to go back. So if I mess it up, y'all understand. I'm going to talk about oh, that's not the clicker. Oh, I've got it. I said, that's the strangest clicker I've ever seen. I told you, it's a time clock. I'm not going to talk about what went on back in 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I stood up for the Ten Commandments. It was a thing of God. I knew God had put me there to acknowledge him. I wrote it in this book, So Help Me God. It's on sale out there. It's $20. It's paperback if you want to get it. What I'm going to talk to you today is about Christianity and God and our nation. And what I've done, and I hope you'll pick up this pamphlet. It's $5. If you can't afford it, tell them you can't afford it, and they'll give you one. Y'all got my word. If you give them all away, I don't care. This was written to teach people about our country. Before you can stand up in government, you've got to know that you've got a reason to stand. You've got to know that you've got a good legal cause. The pastor said not, "Where is the Lord?" And they that handle the law knew me not. Preachers, we don't know our Constitution. And that bothers me. This is really going to bother me. Let's see. There you go. That's the pamphlet that's out there. You know, the Constitution, we have a day, September 17th, we're supposed to put aside to acknowledge the Constitution. September 17th, I looked on my calendar before I came up here. You know what September 17th had on it? Nothing. But you know what September 16th had on it? Mexican Independence Day. That should tell you something. It should tell you that we've forgotten where we're going. If you're told anything about the Constitution, the first thing they tell you is, well, they were all written by a bunch of deists, right? They were written by a bunch of deists. That was wrong. 52 of the 55 signers of the Constitution were members of Christian Orthodox churches. He wasn't. That man's Benjamin Franklin. But I'll tell you this, he knew God and he knew the Bible. He said, as he got up and they'd been arguing for 4 or 5 weeks, weren't getting anywhere, he said, we indeed seem to feel our own want of political wisdom since we're running around in search of it. He said, we've gone back in ancient history for models of government and examined the different forms of those republics which having been formed with the seeds of their own dissolution, now no longer exist. And we viewed the modern states around Europe, but find none of their constitutions suitable to our circumstances. In this constitution, in this situation of this assembly, groping as it were in the dark for political truth and scarce able to distinguish it when presented to us, how has it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights, James 1:17, to illuminate our understanding? In the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for the divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. And to that kind providence, we now owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his nose, it is probable that an empire can rise without his aid. We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings, that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, also to believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. We shall be divided by our little partial local interest. Our projects will be confounded, and we ourselves shall become a reproach and a byword down to future ages. And what is worse, mankind may hereafter from this unfortunate experience despair of establishing governments by human wisdom and leave them instead to war, chance, and conquest. Deist, God didn't have anything to do with our government. How wrong we are today. The chief architect of the Constitution is that man, James Madison. James Madison knew that the Constitution was inspired by God. He said it is impossible for the man of pious reflection not to perceive in it a finger of that almighty hand, which has been so frequently and signally extended in our critical stages of the revolution, to our relief in the critical stages. But, you know, there's something else about this. We can talk about their beliefs all day. And they'll say, well, we don't believe like that. Well, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you something that you won't hear too many places. The Constitution itself is founded on the law of God. Now, you say, well, how can I prove that? How can you show that? Well, I'll tell you. James Madison is chief architect. Article 7 of this Constitution, you can look it up in this little pamphlet, says that the ratification of the Convention of 9 states shall be sufficient to establish the Constitution. Well, what about the other 4? 13 states had adopted the Articles of Confederation. Madison answered it. He said, some of you might ask, how are we going to do this? Why can we do it? He said, the first question can be answered at once by recurring to the absolute necessity of the case, to the great principle of self-preservation, to the transcendent law of nature and of nature's God, which declares that the safety and happiness of society are the object at which all political institutions aim and to which all such institutions must be sacrificed. The law of nature and the law of God. This pamphlet will tell you what they are legally out of Blackstone's commentaries and how they relate and how we've misconstrued them. You go back to the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, you'll see that the Declaration of Independence itself is organic law according to the United States Code. The United States Code says that's the organic law, and if you look down, you'll see the Constitution of the United States. It is the law. And in that organic law, it says we hold these truths to be self-evident. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. That's Romans. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This little pamphlet will tell you what pursuit of happiness is. By the way, it's not 2 cars, and 4 televisions, and fine home, and a lot of food. It's the laws of God. For he is so intimately connected, so inseparably interwoven, the laws of eternal justice with the happiness of each individual, that the latter cannot be attained but by observing the former. And if the former be punctually obeyed, it cannot help but induce the latter. You can't help but be happy if you follow God's law. And if you follow God's law, you can't help but be happy. We need to learn our law. Declaration of Independence is organic law. Sir William Blackstone said, upon these 2 foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation, depend all human laws, that is to say, no human law should be suffered to contradict these. James Madison said about government, this certainly applies to our government today. What is government itself? But the greatest of all reflections on human nature. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. And if angels were to govern men, neither external or internal controls would be necessary. The greatest difficulty in framing a form of government of men over men is this. First, you must enable the government to control the governed. And in the next place, oblige it to control itself. That's what government's all about. Thomas Jefferson recognized what the Constitution does. It was changed to restrain our unnatural power, urge for power. He said, in questions of power then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the change of the Constitution. If you go to the very center of the Bible, you'll find where it says, it's better to put trust in the Lord than put confidence in man. It was a very biblical statement. Or if you want to listen to somebody that really knew what the First Amendment was about, that First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, abridging the freedom of speech or press, or right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government to redress of grievances. The first part being that clause where they try to restrict the acknowledgement of God. Here's what Joseph Story said. He was served for 34 years in the United States Supreme Court, dedicated his work to Marshall. He says, in all events, it's impossible for those who believe in the truth of Christianity as a divine revelation to doubt that it is the especial duty of government to foster and encourage it among all our citizens and subjects. He went on and said, probably at the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the amendment to it, First Amendment, now under consideration, the general, if not the universal sentiment in America was that Christianity ought to receive what? Encouragement from the state. He went on to say this. He said, yet remains a problem to be solved in human affairs whether any free government can be permanent where the public worship of God and the support of religion constitute no part of the policy or duty of the state in any assignable shape. The real object of the amendment was not to countenance, much less to advance Mohammedanism or Judaism or infidelity, or prostrate Christianity, by prostrating Christianity, but to exclude all rivalry among Christian sects and to prevent any national ecclesiastical establishment which should give rise to hierarchy in the patronage of the national government. But let's turn to a lawyer by the name of Charles Grandison Finney. You heard about him, his leader of the Second Great Awakening, and he read the portion of Blackstone's in this pamphlet, and he was an agnostic, so enthusiastic he got a Bible and he went into the woods and became a great evangelist. He said this about politics and religion: God cannot sustain this free and blessed country which we love and pray for unless the church will take right ground. Politics are a part of religion in such a country as this, and Christians must do their duty in this to the country as part of their duty to God. It seems sometimes that the foundations of this nation are becoming rotten. This was 1835. And Christians seem to act as if they thought God did not see what they do in politics, but I tell you, God does see it, and he will bless or curse this nation according to the course they take in it. So let's jump now forward to today. Let's talk about marriage and what that's going to have. The statistics are that out of 40 states, only three have adopted same-sex marriage by referendum. Courts have mandated over 30 cases, in 30 states, same-sex marriage. 23 federal, 7 states. Alabama was going to be 24. And I came to a day that I had to do something. Nobody would do anything. I put out this order on Sunday, 8 February, before the federal judge's order was to take effect on the 9th. After it had gone to the United States Supreme Court, everybody thinks I'm radical. I was against federal government. I'm not against federal government. I just want them to stay where they're supposed to be. And the only party she had before her was the Attorney General. He didn't have power over the probate judges, and the federal rules itself says she can't issue an injunction. So when it went up to the Supreme Court and they said, oh no, we're not going to lift the stay, everybody thought it was over. We had same-sex marriage, but it didn't apply to us. Attorney General didn't have over probate judges, and no probate judge was in her court. Under Federal Rule 65, she didn't have that power, that authority. And I put out this order. Effective immediately, no probate judge of the state of Alabama nor any agent or employee of any Alabama probate judge shall issue or recognize a marriage license as inconsistent with our Article 1, Section 3603 of the Alabama Constitution, or 31-19, Code of Alabama 1975. You see, I did it legally. And then I started finding something else. I found out that way we think federal courts are here and state courts are here. And all lawyers, all judges, everybody, federal courts are just hiring state courts. If they say something's unconstitutional, that's it, it's over. That is not the law. And I'm amazed at how simple I can be and understand something so simple that so many wise people have debated it for 3 weeks before the Alabama Supreme Court came through and backed me up. This is the law right here. Lockhart versus Fretwell. This is Clarence Thomas speaking. In our federal system of state trial courts, interpretation of federal law is no less authoritative than that of the Federal Court of Appeals, in whose circuit the trial court is located. The views of the that just said it very plainly. In our federal system, a state trial court can interpret the Constitution just like the federal court. So all we did in Alabama was interpret our own Constitution. Shame on 23 states that have let federal judges come in and tell them their Constitution was bad. I'm telling you, it is a submission without justification. It was restriction of power on the Constitution. The 10th Amendment is very plain. Power is not delegated to the United States, but the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively, or the people. One of those powers is over marriage. I'm going back just a minute and tell you, this is, I'm going to skip some of these cases. That's a case in Florida that says the same thing. In a system where the decisions of lower federal courts, I've got 1 minute left. I'm going to skip forward. This is U.S. versus Windsor. 2013, the United States Supreme Court said this: state laws defining and regulating marriage, of course, must respect the constitutional rights of persons, but subject to those guarantees, regulation of domestic relations is an area that has long been regarded as virtually exclusive province of the states. The states at the time of adoption, and this is a different case, of the Constitution possess full power over the subject of marriage and divorce, and the Constitution delegated no authority to the government of the United States on the subject of marriage and divorce. Now this is 1906, quoted in 2013 by the United States Supreme Court. They go on and they say this: see also in Ray Burris, the whole subject of the domestic relations of husband and wife, parent and child, belongs to the laws of the United States and not to the laws, or laws to the states and not to the laws of the United States. U.S. versus Windsor said this: when the Constitution was adopted, the common understanding was that the domestic relations of husband and wife and parent and child were matters reserved to the states. Be careful, read that. If they go into marriage, where are they going next? Where are they going when you instruct your child about homosexuality? In 1986, the Bowers versus Hardwick was a case in Atlanta, Georgia about sodomy. And this is what the United States Supreme Court said at that time: the court is most vulnerable, comes nearest to illegitimacy when it deals with judge-made constitutional law having little or no cognizable roots in the language or design of the Constitution. There should be therefore great resistance to expand the substantive reach of those clauses, 5th and 14th, particularly if it requires redefining the category of rights deemed to be fundamental. Otherwise, the judiciary necessarily takes to itself further authority to govern the country without express constitutional authority. That's what's happening today. I don't mind if this is recorded by the Southern Poverty Law Center. I've already got complaints against me. I'll tell you the truth. The United States Supreme Court has no right to go in and redefine marriage defined by God and defined in the history of our country. It has no right, no authority. They're creating rights out of thin air. And what's going to happen is the nation's going to suffer religiously. It just won't be some flower shop or some bakery shop in Oregon or some Navy SEAL. It's going to be everybody. You know, one of the questions asked by Alito was very informative. It said, Alito turned to Vercelli and said, in the Bob Jones case, the court held that a college was not entitled to tax-exempt status if it opposed interracial marriage or interracial dating. That was Loving versus Virginia in 1967, which appropriately found that you couldn't restrict that. But his question continues: so would the same apply to a university or college if it opposes same-sex marriage? And here's the reply: I would need to know more specifics. But it's certainly going to be an issue. I don't deny that. Well, I'm going to tell you, they practiced that answer. They knew what the question was going to be. We've got to stand up and we've got to fight for our beliefs, for our Bible, for our country, for our Constitution. We've got to recognize that it's not wrong to acknowledge God. It's not wrong to acknowledge natural law. That is part of the Constitution. What I do in my job, I acknowledge God all the time. And we must acknowledge God, just as I said back in 2003. We must acknowledge God. That's our duty. And so I'm not doing any more or any less. Now I want to be said like Paul. The time is, I'm ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I fought a good fight, finished the course. I've kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but to all them that love his appearing. They also love his appearing. May God bless you. Thank you.
I'm just going to go do a book signing for us. Yeah.